I went through high school just knowing that I could do this, that I was going to go to college, that there was no doubt in my mind that I was going to go to college. I mean, that was a given. So the SAT was part of it. It was just something that I had to overcome, another requirement to go to college. And although I was nervous and anxious about the test, I knew that I was college material. I knew that all that I had worked for wasn't all going to go down the drain for one exam. You know, it just made sense in my head that somebody was going to discover me for my talents and not for just one grade. So that was very comforting.
Hi, I'm Eleanor and this is Eric, and we're here to give you all the help you need to do your best on the SAT.
That's right. Now, I took the test a few years ago, and believe me, there's no secret to the SAT. Eleanor and I are going to give you a little background and tell you what the test covers.
A little later, two students, Tracy and Luke, will join us to look at specifically what you and they will need to know to get ready.
Despite what you may have heard, there is no guarantee that taking expensive coaching courses will improve your SAT scores. In fact, we're going to show you some tips and strategies that can help you do your best. And you may also want to find out about other free or inexpensive ways to get ready for the test.
Do a little research. Maybe your school or community center offers a free after-school test prep course.
All the information and advice we cover are in the free booklet, Taking the SAT 1. It also includes a complete sample test that you can take and score yourself. Pick up a copy from your guidance office. Before getting into tips and strategies for the SAT, we're going to go over some basic questions. What's on it, how long is it, and what it's about.
The SAT 1 reasoning test, that's the official name of the SAT, is made up of two parts, verbal and math. The verbal part includes 3 types of questions: analogies, sentence completions, and critical reading. The math part also includes 3 types: regular multiple choice, quantitative comparisons, and student-produced response, or grid-in questions.
You'll have a total of 3 hours to complete 7 test sections. The verbal part includes 2 30-minute sections and 1 15-minute section, as does the math. We've only accounted, though, for 6 sections and 2.5 hours. The test includes 1 more 30-minute math or verbal section, but this section won't count toward your final score. This added section gives the test makers a chance to try out new questions for future tests and to score your test. You will receive 2 scores for the SAT 1, a verbal and a math. Both will be on a scale of 200 to 800. 200 is the lowest score you can get, and 800 is the highest.
In a nutshell, SAT 1 scores give colleges another way to see how ready you are for college compared with other students applying for admission.
Your high school record, meaning your grades and class rank, is usually the best indicator of how well you'll do in college. But high schools can be very different. They can offer different kinds of classes and have different ways of grading. For example, a B in your high school might be more like an A in another.
So the SAT lets you show colleges what you can do independently of your grades and high school record. What's the test about then? Very simply, the SAT 1 measures verbal and math reasoning abilities that develop over time, throughout your entire life. That's why cramming won't really help.
Also, regardless of what anyone tells you, the SAT is not the only thing colleges care about, and it's certainly not the most important. It does not tell the whole story about you, and colleges know that.
I would tell them to just take it easy. That's the most important thing if somebody was nervous about the SATs, because all you have to do is test what you already know and feel confident about yourself as a person, and know that if you do bad on the test, there's still other aspects of you that the college is going to look at. The colleges want to like you just as much as you like the college.
The colleges will look at your essays and interviews, if you happen to go to an interview for college admissions, your grades, your GPA, all sorts of things. Maybe you'll get recommendations from teachers that will help you out, maybe job experiences or internships. All these things all, combine, I think, to what kind of person you are in total and not just one exam.
There are 2 kinds of tips and strategies that will help you on the SAT. General ones for most every question, and specific ones for the different kinds of questions. We're going to start off with 8 very important general tips that can help you get every point you can on the test.
And the first one is know the directions. That means you should know all the directions for every kind of question on the test ahead of time. Remember, if you spend 5 minutes reading directions during the SAT, you will have 5 fewer minutes to answer questions.
Number 2, all questions of the same kind are grouped together, with questions usually going from easier to harder. This is not true, however, of the critical reading questions, which we'll talk about later. Let me give you an example. One math section may include a group of quantitative comparison questions and a group of grid-ins. Within the quantitative comparison group, questions start out easier and get harder as you go along. Within the grid-ins, they also go from easy to hard.
Tip number 3 goes hand in hand with number 2. All questions are worth the same. That means you'll get the same number of points for easy questions as hard ones. So now that you know where the easy and the hard ones are, be sure to answer all the questions that seem easy before spending time on the hard ones. This is what's known as pacing.
On to number 4. Guess wisely and whenever you can on the multiple choice questions. If you don't know the answer for sure, but can rule out one or more choices as definitely wrong, you'll increase your odds of guessing the right answer.
It's different for the math grid-ins. As you'll see later, these questions are not multiple choice. There are no points deducted if your answer is wrong. So go ahead and take a chance on the grid-ins. You have nothing to lose by gridding your hunch. And don't worry, the SAT has some questions on it that are very hard for most people to answer.
That brings us to number 5. It's okay to omit questions. You won't lose any points, but guess when you can. You'll get a full point if you get it right. Many students who score well on the SAT omit a number of questions.
If you have some time left at the end of a section, go back to the questions you omitted, which leads us to number 6. Use your test book for scratch work. Cross off answers you know are wrong, especially when you're guessing, and mark the questions you omit so you can go back to them later.
Just be sure to mark your answers on the answer sheet because you don't get credit for what you write in your test book.
Also, don't lose your place on the answer sheet. Every few questions, you should check the number of your question with the number on the answer sheet.
Speaking of the answer sheet, you should know how it's laid out and how to complete it, which is tip number 7. Familiarize yourself with the sample 1 in taking the SAT 1. It's especially important that you know how to use the math grids. We'll give you specific pointers on those a little later.
Well, okay, we made it, last but not least. Tip number 8, don't make any extra marks on your answer sheet. The machine that scores the test can't tell the difference between a doodle and an answer. So if you change your mind about an answer, make sure you completely erase the first answer before filling in the second.
I'd just like to add that you don't have to get every question right on the SAT to get a good score. In fact, you can get an average score by getting about half the questions right. So don't panic. If you find there are lots of questions you can't answer, it's all right. Just relax and keep your focus on the ones you can.
It's not so much intelligence as much as it is the desire to want to do well. You know, if you want to make money doing anything, it's probably better to study up a little. You know, it doesn't matter what you want to do. You can still be smart and be cool. You know, you can hang out with the right people or listen to the right music, but still do well in school. You know, you can have it all.
Okay, now we're ready to take a look at the kinds of verbal questions on the SAT and some strategies for answering them.
Tracy and Luke, like you, are getting ready to take the SAT and have joined us to get some first-hand practice and advice. How are you two feeling about taking the SAT? Do you think you're ready?
Nervous. Is anyone ever ready for the SAT? I did take the PSAT NMSQT though. That should help.
I think that knowing what to expect would definitely help.
Absolutely. You'll have more confidence on the day of the test.
As we said earlier, the verbal sections include 3 kinds of questions: 19 analogies, 19 sentence completions, and 40 critical reading questions. All in all, there are 78 questions on the verbal sections, and of course, each question counts the same. The best place to begin analogies is with the directions. Remember, all the information we cover is in Taking the SAT 1. Okay. Each question below consists of a capitalized pair of words or phrases followed by 5 other pairs of words or phrases labeled A through E. Select the pair that best expresses a relationship similar to that expressed in the capitalized pair.
So the question is, album is to photograph as what is to what? That doesn't seem so hard.
It isn't if you understand the relationship between album and photograph. And the best way to figure that out is to make up a sentence using the two words.
Like, an album is a place for saving photographs.
That's right. Just replace album and photograph with each pair of words in the answer choices to see if it works in the sentence. The best fit will be the right answer.
Okay. A trial is a place for saving briefs. No. A board is a place for saving directors. Nope. A meeting is a place for saving agendas. Nope. A scrapbook is a place for saving clippings. That works. And finally, a checkbook is a place for saving money. Not quite. The best answer is D, scrapbook clippings.
Make sure to try all 5 choices before selecting the right answer. Even with a precise sentence, some answers may fit better than others.
How fast do I have to work through each problem?
It's not so much an issue of speed as it is using your time wisely.
As we said earlier, the easier questions are at the beginning of each group and the questions get harder as you go along. That's true for all parts of the test except for critical reading. So when working on analogies, for example, try to answer all the easier questions you can before moving on to the harder ones.
So you mean don't get bogged down on a hard question if I haven't done all the easier ones?
Yes, you need every point you can get. And whether a question is easy or hard, it counts the same.
The school that I went to, I think, chose me because I was consistent in all those departments, in my academics and my test scores. And I think that in terms of getting into college, I don't think that it's so significant that it will not allow you to get in, or it will get you in. I know people who have gone into very good schools who didn't have great SAT scores.
Sentence completions test both your vocabulary and your ability to understand the logic of sentences. I'll read the directions while you look at the sample question. Each sentence has 1 or 2 blanks, each blank indicating that something has been omitted. Beneath the sentence are 5 words or sets of words labeled A through E. Choose the word or sets of words that, when inserted in the sentence, best fits the meaning of the sentence as a whole. In other words, fill in the blank or blanks so the sentence makes sense.
Well, that seems pretty straightforward. The answer is E, gradual. I even knew the answer before looking at any of the choices.
And believe it or not, that's one of the best strategies for dealing with sentence completions. Try to figure out words to fill in the blank or blanks without looking at the answers. Then, look for the choice that is most similar to the one you came up with. The best way to check your answer is to reread the question with the answer filled in. Make sure the sentence makes sense.
But what if I don't know what any of the answers mean?
Guess.
Guess?
In terms of questions where you have some idea, or that you can at least eliminate 1 or 2 answers from multiple choice questions, then you have a much better guessing chance in terms of what your percentage will be for a right answer. If you can eliminate 1, that gives you a 1 in 3 or a 30% chance of a correct answer. If you can eliminate 2, you've got a 50-50 between the 2 remaining. And certainly if you can eliminate 3, well, you were there to begin with.
Critical reading questions make up more than half of the verbal part of the SAT-1. These questions give you the best shot at getting the right answers because all the information you need is in the passages. Here are the directions. Answer the questions for each reading passage based on what is stated or implied in the passage and in any introductory material that may be provided.
How well you do on the reading questions depends on your ability to understand and make sense of the passages. But you won't be able to just look back at the passage to find the answers. You'll have to think about it.
Will we be expected to know a lot about the subject of the passage?
Absolutely not. They're chosen so that you can answer all the questions without any additional knowledge.
Are there any strategies for answering critical reading questions?
First of all, read each passage very carefully. All the answers come from the passage. And while you're reading, you might want to underline certain words or make marks in the margins to help you find information later. But too many notes could take too long and be confusing.
Read each question very carefully. Think about what it's asking and look back to the passage for information that will help you. Then, think about how to use the information to answer the question. The information in the passage must support your answer.
Well, can there be more than one right answer to a question?
No, there's only one right answer to any question. What may confuse you is that an answer can be true without being right.
Since critical reading questions don't go from easy to hard, what about pacing?
That's a very good question. The best tip for that is to answer all the questions you can about one passage before moving on to another. And go ahead and jump around within a set of questions to find the easiest ones, but don't jump from passage to passage.
In retrospect, I think it's a good idea to prepare for the SAT at least a couple of months ahead of your exam. When I took it, I didn't pick up the Taking the SAT booklet until probably a short time before I actually took the exam. And although it helped that I wasn't as nervous in preparing for the test, I do still think it's a good idea for students to have a few months preparation for it.
I felt that the SATs really reflected that I really didn't know how to read and write well. I think it showed me that I really need some help. I mean, it was definitely a red flag for me, and it made me think I really need some help in English, and I did do that. For the first year in college, I really worked very closely with a professor, and I worked really hard, and it helped me definitely do much better.
Is it true that we'll have to compare two passages?
Yes, one or more sets of questions will involve two reading passages that are somehow related. A few of the questions will ask you about each passage individually. Others will ask you to compare the two. Use all the strategies we just talked about. You won't be able to remember everything from both passages, so don't try. Look back to each one as you work through the answers.
Well, that's it for the verbal questions. You'll find most of the tips we've talked about in taking the SAT-1. But remember, the booklet also contains a complete sample test. Use it to try out the strategies that we covered.
I had an amazing thing happen from taking the SATs. Because of the college search that the SAT does for you, because you say what your interests are, what your major might be, they gave my name out to a lot of schools that I had never heard of and never would have applied to. And I'm actually attending right now a university that I heard of because they actively pursued me after receiving my information from the College Board. So they actually have helped me out a lot.
It was the first situation where I really had to think far ahead. And now I do that all the time. I'm constantly thinking about the directions my music is going in and the directions that my artwork is going in. And the SATs were really the first time in my life where I started thinking in that way. And now I think that way all the time.
So, Tracy, what's the deal with calculators?
You mean on the SAT?
Yeah, do we have to use a calculator on the test?
No. Like on the PSAT, they're optional, but I'm definitely going to have mine.
Well, I think the problem's are easy enough to work out in the test book or my head.
Yeah, you don't need a calculator to work out any of the problems, but I just like knowing it's there. It makes it easier to check my answers.
Since you two are already talking about calculators, let's continue with that. Is there anything in particular that you'd like to know?
Can we take any kind of calculator to the test?
You can take any four-function scientific or graphing calculator that you regularly use. Look in Taking the SAT-1. It explains what kind of calculators you can and can't use.
Do you think we should take one?
I would strongly recommend it. Whether or not you pick up your calculator during the SAT, it can't hurt to have it with you. It may even help.
And if you do decide to take a calculator, don't try to use it on every problem. Decide how to answer a problem before deciding whether or not to even use your calculator.
I think the calculators help, but I think that the students probably really have to know the math, have the knowledge in their heads already. I think the calculator is just another machine. You push buttons and you get an answer, but you really have to know what to put in.
Like the verbal part of the SAT-1, the math sections include 3 kinds of questions: 35 multiple-choice questions, 15 quantitative comparisons, and 10 student-produced response questions, or as we affectionately call them, grid-ins. There are 60 math questions in all.
With both the multiple choice and quantitative comparison questions, you select the right answer from the choices given. For the grid-ins, there are no choices. You have to provide the answer. Here are a couple of general math tips.
Use your test book for working out the problems. It makes it easier to go back and check your work. Try it when you take the practice test in taking the SAT-1.
Whenever you can, draw the figures described in the questions and mark the measurements on the figures provided.
The directions say, solve each problem using available space on the page for scratch work. Then decide which is the best of the choices given.
Just below the directions, there's a box called Reference Information with lots of geometric formulas. Is that going to be in the test book too?
Yes.
So we don't have to worry about knowing the geometry formulas since they give them to us.
No. If you studied geometry, you should know the most important formulas already. They're simply there in case you forget.
I felt that the prep test course was just wasting my time and wasting my money, basically. I don't feel like that it was really of any value to me, because the only thing that they asked me to do that was beneficial to me was what I was already doing on my own, which was taking practice tests. And it's really, it was really that simple.
My stumbling block is word problems. Any pointers for those?
You bet. Translate as you go.
What does that mean?
Well, I'll show you. Read the next question.
The odometer of a new automobile functions improperly and registers only 2 miles for every 3 miles driven. If the odometer indicates 48 miles, how many miles has the automobile actually been driven? Without picking up my pencil, I can eliminate D and E. If the odometer indicates 48 miles and is registered fewer miles than are driven, the answer must be more than 48.
See, that's another good tip. Do a quick make sense check of the answers before you start working on a question. You may be able to rule out some answers right away.
I want to find out more about this translating business.
It's pretty simple. Translate the words in the problem into equations.
Okay, the relationship between the odometer reading and the actual miles is 2 to 3. This is a ratio problem. So if the odometer reading is 48, 48 over x equals 2 over 3. Then all I have to do is solve for x. After cross-multiplying, I get the equation 2x equals 144, or x equals 72. The answer is B, 72.
I think if you take all these steps, you'll go in there, you'll take that exam like any other test you've ever taken in your life. You'll do good on it. You'll get into college, some college, maybe not the one of your choice, but hopefully you'll get into one of your choice. And life will go on, and you probably won't even think about the test later on. So,
I think that if I had a better score on the SAT, I would have felt more comfortable applying to the same colleges. I think I would have felt a little bit maybe cockier, but really, at the end, I still got what I wanted. I still got accepted to a really good school.
You need to know the format for the quantitative comparisons. But generally, they take less reading, less time to answer, and fewer computation.
Sounds like my kind of question.
Each of the following questions consists of 2 quantities in boxes, one in column A and one in column B. You are to compare the 2 quantities and select A, if the quantity in column A is greater, B, if the quantity in column B is greater, C, if the 2 are equal, and D, if the relationship can't be determined from the information given.
In other words, compare the 2 columns and decide which is larger. No problem. Let's try one.
How about this one? Based on the 2 equations above the boxes, it's asking which is greater, x or y?
Hey, even I can do this question without doing much figuring. Since both equations include 23 and 16, I can cancel those numbers out. That leaves 57 plus x and 27 plus y. Because y is added to a smaller number, it has to be larger. So, B is the answer. The quantity in column B is greater.
This question reveals a good hint for quantitative comparisons. You don't always have to finish your calculations to figure out the right answer.
But the most important tip is to memorize the 4 possible answers before the test.
So if you get some kind of book that can prepare you for the SAT, and just knowing the format, it's a step inside the door. Is you got it, you know?
the PSAT that some math questions aren't multiple choice.
That's right. You have to figure out your own answer and fill in the grids. And one key to grid-ins is knowing how to complete the grids.
Well, what do we need to know?
It's all explained in Taking the SAT 1. The grids can accommodate integers, fractions, or decimals. So if you're used to working with fractions, you can grid in a fraction answer, and if you're used to working with decimals, you can grid in a decimal answer.
Feeling comfortable with the grid will help you on the day of the test. Let's take a look at a grid-in question. And remember, if you use a calculator, use it only to do the calculations, and write down your work in your test book. It makes it easier to look for mistakes. By the way, no points are deducted for wrong answers on the grid-ins, so don't hesitate to guess.
I got an answer of 3.5.
I got an answer of 3 1/2.
Well, both of your answers are correct. Let's fill in the separate grids for the different answers. First, let's do the decimal. To make sure you don't make any mistakes filling in your answer on the grid, always write the answer in the spaces above the bubbles, and then simply fill in the matching bubble below each number or symbol.
It's a little trickier with mixed numbers like 3 1/2. The grid cannot accommodate a mixed number. On the grid, 3 1/2 together would read as 31 halves, which is wrong. So you must put an answer like 3 1/2 in the fraction form 7 halves. Both forms of the answer are correct, 3.5 and 7 halves.
We've covered all the different types of questions you'll find on the SAT 1.
As well as some important tips and strategies for doing your best.
I guess now it's up to us.
Well, I know I'm going to practice as much as I can on sample questions.
And review all the test-taking tips in Taking the SAT 1.
The more you review and practice, the better prepared you'll be on the day of the test. So relax. The SAT is only one part of the story about you that colleges look at. Good luck.
It's not so bad. It's not this terrible, traumatic challenge of, you know, if you do poorly on it, it's all over. You can take it more than once. You can take it several times. There's definitely ways you can improve on taking the test, and all that really matters is not really thinking about the results or thinking about the consequences. Just thinking about, you know, the next question on that piece of paper.
Just take it easy, be calm. It's not a big deal. You just go ahead and do the best that you can.